And that song gets me hyped up. Welcome, everyone. Just a quick reminder, we are here Mondays, we are here Wednesdays at 10 p.m. And tonight our guest is the one and only Megyn Kelly. What an honor for her, really. But in all seriousness, can't wait to bring Megyn into the show. I just wanted to, we mentioned this at the end of the last show that we did on Wednesday, but in all seriousness, we were the top new, I think we were like the top new comedy podcast in the country and number 3 new podcast in the country as of last week on the charts. So I'm just beyond grateful to all of you for subscribing. Subscribing helps the show a ton. I was looking through some of the reviews. Amazing. I'm just so grateful and genuinely so honored that you're watching and liking what you see. Before we begin, tonight's look is casual but not full Ellen. Never go full Ellen. That's what I'm doing right now. And I also want to raise my glass tonight to House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries. This is F9. We can put it up on the screen. Seen here looking very cool and very normal, just like a regular American guy. This is not photoshopped at all. It was actually like just the magnitude of him being on that bench is what curved the bench. The bench could not withstand the force of Hakeem Jeffries' greatness. And so I'm thinking maybe he's the unofficial mascot of the show, and I do expect to pay tribute to him regularly. So stay tuned for that. This one is for you tonight, Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries. But in all seriousness, it would take me a very long time. It would take anybody a very long time to sufficiently sketch out all of the irregularities in the Jeffrey Epstein case. You've probably heard by now that the Trump administration basically closed that case as of last night. They leaked a memo to Axios that said, hey, this is, basically as far as it goes. We think everything's been made public that needs to be made public. And while clearly not every claim about Jeffrey Epstein is true, clearly the government's official story is not the full truth. And now the Trump administration has announced the case is closed. The DOJ's, quote, systematic review revealed no incriminating client list, according to that memo. There was also no credible evidence found, according to the DOJ, that Epstein blackmailed prominent individuals as part of his actions. This is an ongoing quote. We did not uncover evidence that could predicate an investigation against uncharged third parties. We're going to talk to Megyn about this in just a second. But as you can imagine, the fallout raged all day today. Let's go ahead and roll S1 from the White House press briefing.
So what happened to the Epstein client list that the Attorney General said she had on her desk?
Well, I think if you go back and look at what the Attorney General said in that interview, which was on your network on Fox News.
Got the quote.
Go ahead.
John Roberts said, DOJ may be releasing the list of Jeffrey Epstein's clients. Will that really happen? And she said, it's sitting on my desk right now to review.
Yes, she was saying the entirety of all of the paperwork, all of the paper in relation to Jeffrey Epstein's crimes. That's what the Attorney General was referring to, and I'll let her speak for that.
Okay, so one thing that's interesting here, and I want to use this point to actually bring in the one and only Megyn Kelly, is that the memo itself said, quote, incriminating client list. So I want to get Megyn's thoughts on that. First of all, Megyn Kelly, thank you so much for staying up late for us. And I know that this is a prestigious opportunity for you. I hope it helps your brand.
I really am honored. And I did have the greatest mixologist I know, my husband, Doug Brunt, make me a little marg for the occasion, Emily Jashinsky. So I'm ready to after party with you.
Oh, perfect. Can he send those in the mail? Because I would love a good mixologist. That's why I have
It's possible. Very possible. I'm going to look into that. That could be happening for you on Wednesday. Stand by.
I love it. Oh, amazing. Okay, well.
Cheers to
cheers,
a great
Megyn.
kickoff of your hugely successful show already. So excited. The audience, of course, loves you.
Thank you. And in all seriousness, thank you for the opportunity. People who've watched me over the years know what Megyn has done to help me and support me. And also that, like, even before I knew Megyn, I was like the biggest admirer of hers. So it's very gratifying. But Megyn, I want to ask you about, in the memo, the language that Pam Bondi used, which was no incriminating client list, that really jumped out to me, actually, because it maybe gives her a little wiggle room between saying that she had a client list and then saying there's no incriminating client list. So I wanted to ask you if maybe that's what's going on here before we get into some of these other details.
I don't know what's going on with her. I believe Dan Bongino's not lying to me. I really do. When Dan Bongino puts his name on something, I don't know Cash as well, but I know Dan. I know him well. We've worked together many, many years. He didn't just turn around and start lying. That's not who he is. He's an honest guy, and he takes this role very seriously, and I trust him. And I trust him not to actively mislead me or you. However, Pam Bondi has definitely made multiple inconsistent statements, and I'm sorry, but she does not deserve the benefit of my good opinion, and I'm not prepared to give it to her. She's, yes, on camera saying that clip that Peter Doocy was referencing, where John Roberts asked her, do you have the client list? Like, are you going to release a client list? And she said, yes. He said client list, and she said, yes, it's on my desk right now. So it was not as amorphous as Caroline, to her credit. She's trying to cover for the administration, which is her job, but they put her in a very difficult position. It's not amorphous. It's very clear. She said yes. And here's what happened. What happened was Pam Bondi said that, and then a week later, she said she was going to be releasing some very interesting documents the next day, when on Jesse Waters' show, like 6 days after that first hit, he said, hey, what client list is coming out? And she was like, it's going to be getting very interesting, and some interesting Epstein documents are coming out tomorrow. And that is when the influencers, right-wing influencers who had been very good to Trump, who amidst all the deranged media out there, were able to see through the bullshit and reported honestly and helped him a lot, and did not deserve the humiliation that she heaped upon them. It was not through their own doing. She invited them there. I mean, who wouldn't go, right? It's Pam Bondi. Do you want to come meet with the head of the FBI and the vice president for an exclusive Epstein leak? Yeah, yes. Most people in media would say yes to that. So they went, and in the classic line from Animal House, you fucked up. You trusted us. That's what happened. They fucked up because they trusted her, and they were humiliated because she gave them all these binders that read Epstein files, volume 1. And there was nothing new in there. Nothing. There was no scoop. Why would she do that? And it led to, behind the scenes, like all the White House staffers, like the top people in the White House for Trump, distancing themselves from Pam Bondi immediately. Like, we don't know why she did that. And then it came out that they were urging her not to do it. But I don't know what she was up to. She wanted to have some moment where she looked like she was the one. And then she was in trouble, and she knew it. So she said, all right, that's just the first tranche. I'm really pissed off. The FBI is the one who screwed me. They said everything was in there. Okay, like you need to know. You need to know that no lawyer just sloppily calls all these PR people in and says, here are the files, without knowing what's in there. But she wants us to believe she did. Okay, so she either was clueless or she intentionally embarrassed them. I don't know which is better. And then she said, more is coming. More is coming. And we waited and waited and waited. Those people did not get an exclusive to redeem them. And instead, she got caught on camera by James O'Keefe saying, there are thousands and thousands of videos like showing child pornography. And it was like, wait, what? Child pornography? No one's been talking about that. I mean, we know he had like a predilection for very young girls, generally, 17, but the ones looked more like 14, but we hadn't heard like 8. So, what exactly does she mean by child pornography? We don't know. When she found out from James O'Keefe, he was about to drop that on her the next day, she ran to the microphones and on her own was like, I've got all these videos. So it was very clear to me she was trying to make it look like I didn't say anything out of turn to the James O'Keefe operative. I'll say this right on camera. It was just very obvious what she was doing. But it was still a loop, because it was like, we're talking about client lists. We're talking about people who Jeffrey Epstein may have blackmailed. How have we taken a loop now over to weird, inappropriate, disgusting pornography? Okay, so to me, that already seemed odd and like a slip, but it seemed like perhaps this is where she's going to plant her flag now. Like, this is the extra stuff, because either there is extra stuff that she decided she can't show us, or there isn't and there never was. And she was lying when she was like, it's on my desk, and trying to hype the story, hype, whatever your word is. So that's March. She's now switched to like this thing with O'Keefe and on camera about the child pornography, sexual assault material. And the next, so we're waiting in April and May and June, and now here comes July, and we get the drop to Axios, a left-leaning publication.
Right, the opposite of the influencers.
Yeah, exactly. They're never going to kick the same tires that right-wing influencers, who are the ones who care about the Epstein story, would kick, which they're not dumb. They know that. So they do this late holiday weekend drop through Axios, which is just going to, lick, their boots saying, thanks so much for this exclusive, which we know is going to get us millions of clicks. And now nobody's talking about it. So and in the memo, we've gone from, I have it, the client list. Yes, the client list. It's on my desk to no client list and no names. And by the way, at the same time all this was happening, Alina Habba, who was Trump's personal lawyer and at the time in February, counselor to the president and would become part of the DOJ team working for Bondi within 3 weeks of these comments on Piers Morgan, went on camera to say, these are some very bad people. We've got names. We've got client lists. And the only reason you don't know about it is because there wasn't transparency. That's what Bondi had said too, that this administration before us wasn't transparent. And Alina Habba said, I'm not going to get ahead of letting them have their day in court. I'm going to let the guilt or innocence come out in court. But yeah, people will be held accountable under Cash and Pam Bondi. Okay, so that was all the messaging prior to Sunday night. So my main position here, Emily, is people are right to be skeptical. They have every right to distrust now the messaging because of the way this was handled. But I do see a distinction personally and professionally between what Pam Bondi has said and done and what Kash Patel and Dan Bongino have said and done. Because while people want to bring up what Kash and Dan said while they were podcasters and out of the administration, I'm sorry, but it doesn't really reflect anything about what they knew or should know as FBI director and deputy director.
Bondi, for what it's worth, and it's very worth mentioning this, by the way, and Julie K. Brown pointed this out actually back in February when all of this was happening, was the Florida Attorney General during these critical Epstein years. Julie K. Brown said she was Florida's AG 2011 to 2019, a period of time when Epstein's plane records became public, victims' lawsuits were filed, and a lot of new evidence against Epstein surfaced. So questions should be asked about why she didn't take up the case or launch a probe when she was AG in Florida. And Megyn, just to, I think, ask about everything you laid out, it sounds like you don't see a sort of plausible explanation that will satisfy the public for how Bondi has conducted herself since late February.
No.
She either knows or
I don't
she
get
either, there's no good explanation.
Why did she say why was she leading the media along? The thing that I don't understand, if you want to put total faith in the memo that they leaked to Axios, there's no there. And you may or may not know about me, Emily, but I am the least conspiratorial person you'll ever meet. I believe in almost all of the government lies. I do. I do. So,
oh, that's right. You get 10 boosters.
You're right. No, I did get a booster. One booster, two COVID shots and a booster.
Driving to the drink.
I know. Me too. And now I have an autoimmune issue. Great.
That's right. That's what the tequila's for. I think it is actually a medicinal. We'll have to ask Bobby about that.
Right. Okay. So, but anyway, it's not whatever. I mean, I believe COVID started in a lab and all that. I'm not a complete loon, but I'm just saying I'm not somebody who thinks we didn't have the moon landing or all that stuff. So my point is simply on Epstein, all along, I've been hey, he might have killed himself. He might have, he's facing a lifetime in jail. He's a miserable guy. I don't know if there's going to be client lists or not. I'm not sure. So my point in raising this is for me to be looking at her saying, I don't believe you is telling. It's telling even in my own heart, because I am trying to go down the non-conspiratorial route to say, okay, there are no client lists. It was just Jeffrey Epstein and his own perversions. I'm just going to forget all the stuff about the planes and the islands and all that. Okay, I'm just going to say, I know Ghislaine Maxwell was convicted of trafficking girls to Jeffrey. That is true. There was no evidence in that trial she was trafficking them to, all the other names that we've heard or any others that we haven't. So, okay, I'm going down the lane with you. What then makes Pam Bondi come out and do all those things I've got juicy stuff is basically what she was saying, and get the influencers there to try to look like shit's going down, you're going to get the truth from us, and then doubling and tripling down. And then why did she switch it to child pornography, which I do believe there is. I believe the FBI does have that of Jeffrey Epstein. But to me, I guess that was probably her out, because now she's starting to realize either she is caught that she doesn't have the other stuff, or someone has slapped her hand to say, you can't release that. And so now she's got to pivot to something entirely, it's not off topic, but it's not what was being promised. Client lists and blackmail material were what we thought. I mean, Jeffrey Epstein's sick, disgusting, felonious enjoyment of child sexual assault material is disgusting and horrific, but it's a pivot away from where we were going on the story and what she was promising. So I don't know. I wish I had all the answers. All I know is it doesn't make sense. And as my mentor, Judge Judy, says, if it doesn't make sense, it isn't true.
I don't know if you've seen some of the reactions today. I mean, MAGA world has actually been pretty upset. Then it kind of became, it evolved into something somewhat interesting. I saw, for example, Alex Jones saying that indications to him suggest that Donald Trump, and this is going to absolutely get conspiratorial, Megyn, but Donald Trump is in control of the information and is using it to make the quote unquote deep state comply with him. And that's why it's not being released into the public.
Is that my margarita or is it what you said? I just got an instant headache. What?
I confronted you with Alex Jones quotes. Yes.
Oh, no, but I have to tell you something about Alex Jones. So, he and I have a long history together. It's actually kind of
right.
crazy. But we're fine now. But Alex Jones, when I interviewed him, I don't know. You can't hold grudges in this business, or you have absolutely no connections with anybody. The thing about Alex is, obviously, we don't have to talk about Sandy Hook.
Right.
But he has been right about so much. Even when I interviewed him at NBC and we went back and started looking at all of his crazy claims, and I'm like, well, would you look at this weird shit? He's saying the fish are turning gay and trans.
The frogs, Megyn, facts first, please.
The Florida and the toothpaste, which back then sounded nuts, but well before RFKJ came on the scene, I learned it was true from Alex Jones. Not from his word, but we went back into deep fact checking at NBC and was like, well, she's right about that. I'm just saying, Alex Jones is actually right about a lot of things. But this one, I don't know, because I don't even understand the theory that he's positing. It is also possible that there are deep-pocketed donors to both Democrats and Republicans who don't want to see this thing come out for various reasons. And that they went to Trump, who's very transactional, and said, we don't want that coming out. And Trump called Pam Bondi and put her in a tough spot. That's total speculation. I don't know whether that's true at all. I'm just in the lane of make-believe right now, trying to figure out her 180. Many people believe that Jeffrey Epstein was connected in the spy world, that Ghislaine Maxwell's dad worked for the Mossad. Is there an Israeli connection? I don't know. But I know enough to know we're probably never going to know. And unfortunately, there's almost nothing that any of these characters can say now that's going to satisfy the people who want answers. Because in fairness to this administration, they're not the ones who created all the conspiracy theories, because they're the ones who completely bastardized the FBI and led to, yes, I don't mean just the Biden administration. It was happening under Trump, but the Democrats and the deep state that are right now inside the FBI are the ones who have led us not to trust them at all, even when you've got Cash and Dan at the top. I mean, I happen to know from my sources that deep state is undermining them right now, is working to undermine both of those guys right now and from the second they got in there. And those two are doing their level best to combat it. But my point is simply there's been a breakdown in the trust of both FBI and DOJ for years now that you can't saddle entirely on Pam Bondi. She's just the cherry on top of the sundae, and she didn't help on the Epstein stuff. So it's a long, complex story that I don't know we're ever going to fully understand. Yeah,
I think that's pretty obviously true that at this point there's no getting to the bottom of it. Unless something unexpected happens and we get quick answers. But Vicky Ward reported, this was at Rolling Stone, she said 4 separate sources told me on the record that Epstein's dealings in the arms world in the 1980s had led him to work for multiple governments, including the Israelis. Some of these sources are more reliable than others, but the gist of the claims that you will be able to hear and ultimately watch in the 3-hour doc series that actually came out is that Maxwell, who was himself a conduit between the Israelis and other governments during his lifetime, introduced Epstein to Israeli leaders, who then allegedly used Epstein as the equivalent of an old-fashioned Russian sleeper, someone who could be useful in an influence campaign. And the only other bit that I want to add to that, Megyn, is the Bill Barr connection. Bill Barr was AG when the Epstein suicide happened. And Bill Barr's father, this is not at all determined, but when he was headmaster at the Dalton School, right after his tenure, Yeah, right after his tenure, Epstein himself got hired to teach math and physics.
He taught at Dalton.
Despite having nothing really on his resume. The headmaster who was the successor to Bill Barr's dad, who was also reportedly OSS, and then Bill Barr himself was CIA. He was, part of his job was stonewalling the church committee, and this does sound all very crazy to say aloud, but this is all documented factual stuff. That headmaster said that he...
Headmaster.
That seems like a slur at this point, Megyn.
That's racist.
Yeah. Get out of here with your bigotry. The headmaster.
I still sleep in a master bedroom, too. I just want you to know that. It's not primary. I'm sick of that shit.
God. This is how I get canceled. But he said the headmaster who took over after Bill Barr's dad, Donald Barr, said that he was pretty sure that Bill Barr's dad is the one who hired Jeffrey Epstein. That was the kind of thing that he was doing, and he didn't think that he had hired Jeffrey Epstein. It's all a lot. Alex Acosta.
Okay, but wait. I'll give you the counterpoint, because if you do cognitive behavioral therapy, you're allowed to say like, "Oh my God, the sky is falling. It's falling. It's falling. It's falling. It's falling." But the rule of cognitive behavioral therapy is that you then must make the list on the other side. But it hasn't fallen. It's never fallen. I thought it was falling yesterday, and the day before that, and the day before that, and it didn't fall. It's still up there, and I'm fine. Like you have to do both sides of the list in order to come out with a rational assessment. And my own other side of the list there is Jeffrey Epstein had friends at MIT. He had friends, in the White House, as you know, within the Buckingham Palace. He genuinely wooed Alan Dershowitz into becoming a contact and somewhat friendly. He was his lawyer. Alan Dershowitz was, in regular contact with him. After Jeffrey Epstein cut that plea down in Florida, he had a dinner party at his house. Katie Couric was there. Jeffrey Epstein, Prince Andrew showed up at that after he had pleaded guilty to this prostitution with a minor, which is not a thing. A minor cannot be a prostitute. Anyway, so my point is simply, many people were genuinely fooled by Jeffrey Epstein. So I don't really have a hard time believing that he could go into the Dalton school, talk the talk, and as long as he was saying the right things at that time, which it wasn't even woke back then, it was just, elite. Could get himself a job. The people smarter and better connected than Bill Barr hired him, cozied up to him, went to his house. And generally that was done because he had shit tons of money. And also he had enough connections that it legitimized him. People would meet him and be like, "Oh, you're friends with Bill Clinton? Oh, then sure, I can be friends with you. Oh, you just spoke at MIT. You were having dinner with the president? Oh, cool." Like, all of us have these quick check ways of making sure the person we're about to let into our life or our company are legit. And in Jeffrey Epstein's case, those weren't lies. He really did have those connections. It wasn't like he was name dropping. He legit had those. So my point is simply, could be that thing you said about Bill Barr, or could just be he was a player. He was a good player even back then. He did have connections and he knew how to use them.
I think that's entirely reasonable too. And it's very easy to get caught in the fever swamps in this story, because anytime you have somebody who mingles with so many powerful folks, they inevitably, even if nothing was done wrong, will have all of these connections. So Megyn, on a much more important note, I have all kinds of questions to ask you about Taylor Swift and Alex Cooper. We talked about Katie Couric, and I just want to keep going in the Mount Rushmore sort of powerful, brave women. So we'll get to that in just 1 second. First, though, let me tell you about a story about a guy named Leo Grillo. Well, on a road trip, Leo came across a Doberman. This guy was severely underweight and clearly in trouble. Leo rescued that Doberman and named him Delta. Such a great name, but sadly, Delta was just one of many animals that needed help, which inspired Leo to start Delta Rescue, the largest no-kill, care-for-life animal sanctuary in the world. They've rescued thousands of dogs, cats, and horses from the wilderness, and they provide their animals with shelter, love, safety, and a home. This dedication and everlasting love to animals is Leo's mission and legacy. Delta Rescue relies solely on contributions from people like us, and if you want caring for these animals to be part of your legacy, speak with your estate planner, because there are tax-saving estate planning benefits too. You can grow your estate while letting your love for animals live well into the future. Check out the estate planning tab on their website to learn more and speak with an advisor. We call a dog man's best friend for a reason. You can help those who need it most. So please visit deltarescue.org today to learn more. That's deltarescue.org. We are once again joined by Megyn Kelly. Megyn, like I said, we're going down the Mount Rushmore here of powerful, beautiful, wonderful women. And that means we are going to talk about this news story that Doug Emhoff was tasked with bringing Taylor Swift into the Kamala Harris campaign. This is in the Daily Mail. It's courtesy of the new book that's out from some DC reporters. So Josh Dawsey, Tyler Pager, and Isaac Arnsdorf. It's called 2024, How Trump Retook the White House and the Democrats Lost America. They promised to have many receipts. This is actually a pretty interesting one. So Taylor Swift's attorney wrote back when Doug Emhoff, who's an entertainment lawyer, reaches out and says, quote, Swift would do what Swift thought best in regards to potentially appearing with the Harris campaign rather than just making an endorsement. That obviously never happened. And so is this, Megyn, a story about Taylor Swift being annoying or a story about Kamala Harris being toxic? Maybe a little bit of both.
Yeah, a bit of both, I'd say. And also just Kamala Harris being pathetic, absolutely pathetic, and not being able to read America or the room at all. So
I'm going to say read.
She is technically a lawyer, so I'm going to guess she got that one down. Though, here's what happened. They desperately wanted the Taylor Swift endorsement. They wanted to work her for it in the same way they were working like Beyonce. The Democrats are obsessed with celebrity, and they still, I love it. I don't want them to be disabused of the notion. They still think this shit works. I don't know how many elections I have watched from my perch at Fox News when I was just starting at ABC News back in 2004, I should say. And then Fox, all the elections I was on set for, every time. And the Republicans are like, oh, Sheryl Crow is at the National Convention. Oh no, James Taylor. Oh God, Alicia Keys played. Never. It doesn't move the needle at all. They convince themselves that this is really what they need. They're so dumb. They really just don't get that they actually need to connect with real humans, regular Americans, who are not totally off-putting and weird with like blue hair, and put them on stage and actually try to have a moment with their candidate and this person. I mean, in Kamala Harris, they couldn't do it. She's incapable. So anyway, fine. So they decided to go with the celebrities and the musicians in particular for some reason during the Kamala Harris campaign. And they're like, we got to get Taylor. And Doug Emhoff was like, I got this. Doug Emhoff, who did literally nothing in the campaign to help her.
My beer. Yeah.
The most important thing that came out about Doug Emhoff in the campaign was that he had allegedly beaten another girlfriend right before Kamala Harris. And to the point where then they had some scuffle later when he had a scuffle with her on the night at the Cannes Film Festival. And then there was another incident where he allegedly impregnated the nanny, who then lost the baby on a night when he was visiting her, to the point where something happened and the ambulance had to show up, but none of the mainstream media was interested in investigating this. Doug Emhoff denied all of that, but the Daily Mail did great reporting on it, and I myself have spoken with the woman who says he beat her at Cannes. She's a very successful professional. She has absolutely no reason to lie. She's a Democrat. Anyway, so that's his big contribution, but he's like, I can save this. I'm going to deliver Taylor. So he says, I'm a lawyer, and her lawyer is at my firm, or my old firm, Venable. And so he contacts this lawyer. He thinks he's got it, and they're getting really excited. They're waiting. They're hoping. And then you remember the night of, I think it was the Democratic National Convention.
That's right.
She endorsed via paper statement, like on social media, saying, I'm going to vote for Kamala Harris and Tim Walz, and it's because of Tim Walz and his LGBTQ policies. She really loves boys getting tampons in their boys' rooms, apparently, and she really loves the mandatory transing of children. Honestly, that's what she was endorsing. Yeah. Tim Walz was doing child custody battles against parents who didn't want their child to be transed to the opposite sex, and he was allowing courts in Minnesota to declare that they had jurisdiction over these children, and then allowing it to happen over the parents' objection, which they were treating like it was child abuse. That's what made her endorse. So flash forward to, they're all giddy. And the Kamala Harris recording of this book said, oh, should I mention it at my next campaign event? And to their credit, the campaign said, all right, that seems a little thirsty, which is the word, which I like. So she didn't. But the whole rest of the time, they're like, we need Doug to pull together the on-stage endorsement. Like, she's going to show up, she's going to endorse me, she's going to sing, she's going to tell everybody to vote for me. It literally would have done nothing. It would have been, all they could get Beyonce to do was to show up. She wouldn't even perform. It didn't move the needle at all. They got Oprah Winfrey out there, didn't move the needle at all. They got both Obamas out there, didn't move the needle at all. No one wanted to vote for Kamala Harris. Taylor Swift does not have political influence. Oprah Winfrey doesn't either. And guess what? Neither does Michelle Obama. Neither does Barack Obama anymore. I'm sorry, these are hard truths. If you're having trouble dealing with them, you might need one of these. But Taylor was never the answer to their problems. And the lawyer wrote back, she's going to do what she's going to do. And they waited, apparently, with bated breath up until the bitter, bitter end, where she left them clinging on to empty hopes, just like a jilted teenager who might be pictured in a Taylor Swift song.
I mean, I was going to say, that's exactly what it was. She just kept them waiting and pining for her, yearning for her. And they put so much, I mean, one of the big takeaways from the story is they put so much effort into it, which is incredibly funny because as you were saying, the output, we know, I mean, she tried to take down Marsha Blackburn. That went so well that Marsha Blackburn's now a senator. So
they get so drunk on their own wine, Emily, these stars, that they're like, I have infinite powers. I can swing the No, you can't. I'm sorry, you can't. You have absolutely no influence in this sphere. If you want little girls to start singing your song, that you can do. You actually are quite good at that. But if you want voters to start voting your way, sorry, it's a no.
Okay, so this is actually a really interesting note to transition to this last clip that I wanted to get your reaction to about Alex Cooper, somebody who did sit down with Kamala Harris. Kamala Harris nailed that coveted Call Her Daddy slot. Now, Call Her Daddy is a very popular podcast, but Kamala Harris did the sit down. It did not go well. It clearly did not move the needle. Alex Cooper was invited on Sunday to sing Take Me Out to the Ball game during the 7th inning stretch at the Cubs-Cardinals game. And she's like out promoting her new hydration beverage. But let's roll this clip, Megyn. It did not go well, much like the Kamala Harris appearance on Call Her Daddy.
All right, Daddy Gang and Cubs fans, are you ready? You've never seen something like this before. A 1,
You're an
a 2,
idiot.
a 3.
Take me out to the ball game. Take
Me out to the crowd. Mommy's on peanuts and Cracker
God.
Jack. I don't care. Never come back. So let's root for the Cubbies. If they don't win, it's a shame. So it's 1, 2, 3 strikes. You're out at the old game.
It's delightful. Nailed it.
Who's dumber, that girl or those 2 losers who acted as her little backup dancers? I mean, who's
I was
more
gonna say
pathetic?
Kamala Harris. First of all, as a Brewers fan, this could not have happened to a nicer fan base, that of the Cubs. But Megyn, this is, to me, it struck me as it was Alex Cooper thinking that she's much more like beloved and charming than she actually is. You get in front of a crowd full of normal people. Like, that's as good of a, I would say, sample of the Chicago area at a Cubs game for the July weekend as you could find. And she immediately gets booed. She's liked by her cult followers, but outside of that, she's not likable.
No, because she's one step above that Bonnie Blue. That's she's the same line of work. It's the same person.
The same line.
It's truly, it's like, what, have you ever seen somebody with less class make more money being utterly classless? I mean, there's a couple that come to mind, but you really have to try. That's how she makes her money. She has 0 class and she deals day to day in abject vulgarity. I mean, there's room for like podcasts that talk about sex. You know, I don't say everybody's got to be a Dr. Ruth where it was done kind of in a PG-13 way with some laughs and there was a level of innocence to her. But this girl leans into vulgarity, true, deep vulgarity, and she seems to revel in it. And she wants my kids and anybody else's kids to learn about sex this way, it's another version of pornography. It's the same thing. The same reason you shouldn't let your 12-year-old son watch the internet and see porn on there is the same reason you shouldn't let your young child, whether they're in their teens or young 20s, listen to this nitwit whose brand is classless vulgarity. I'm sorry, but that's the truth about her. And for some reason, someone gave her the invitation to participate in the seventh inning stretch, and she might have been able to save it had she done it earnestly. Had she could have laughed at the fact that she had no voice. She could have said something like that in the mid, like, I'm trying. If she had tried earnestly, they probably wouldn't have booed her. But she clearly was taking their song. I realize it's at all baseball games, and taking a massive dump all over it, which is perfectly on brand for her and her vulgarity and crassness. And they reacted accordingly, because I'll defend the Chicago Cubs fans. They have taste. They have one thing, they have taste. Okay?
They do not.
They do. I lived there for 5 years. They know quality when they see it or don't see it. Like when Sammy Sosa was there, they knew it was good. They knew exactly what they had there. A star. Anyway, my point is,
and he turned out to be totally on the up and up.
What? It was a different time.
That's right.
Big competition was Mark McGwire. Everybody was doing it, Emily. Who are you to judge?
I know.
Anyway. Hey. So my point is, you're right. She's left her little bubble where I think she's just used to her like staff kissing her ass, telling her how wonderful she is, and her weird little daddy gang where she just makes the most crass, honestly, disgustingly vile comments about something that's supposed to be, yeah, it can be great to get your freak on, but at its nature, it's supposed to be something really kind of beautiful and awesome between someone you really love and something you treasure. And here's another hint. Something that should be private, you prostitute. Okay, sorry.
No, I think that went great. So we have to run, but Megyn, I've actually meant to tell you this off air for years, but I do want to say I have this like vivid memory. I had a late shift during my summer job in 2009, and I would watch your show every single day. That summer, I would sit down and watch the show every single day, and I have a vivid memory of looking up at the TV in my parents' living room and saying, if I could do that just once, it would be the coolest thing in the world.
I love that story, EJ.
It's true.
Thank you so much. Well, I have to tell you, as much as I love you and I think you're awesome, like, I didn't want to go into business with you just to be nice to you. I saw what an incredible talent you are. I was listening to you over on The Federalist and Unheard. You were bouncing around. I'm like, what is this? Is there a possibility that this gal will come on our show and then you started to, and it was like, all right, is there any possible way this gal would want to come into business with me? And lots of people want to be in business with you, Emily. You don't have to be a genius to see the rising star that you are. So I'm thrilled that we have this going. I'm not surprised at all to see what a hit your show is, and I can't wait to see what comes next.
Oh, that is so nice. It's truly a dream for me, and I hope I do you proud. So Megyn Kelly, thank you for staying up late.
Love you, lady. See you soon.
Thanks. All right. Well, let's talk about Tax Network USA. If you're stressed about those back taxes, maybe you missed the April deadline, or your books are a mess, do not wait. The IRS is cracking down. Penalties add up fast, 5% per month, up to 25% just for not filing, but there's help. Tax Network USA can take the burden off your shoulders and stop the spiral before it gets worse. They've helped thousands of Americans, whether you're an employee, a small business owner, or haven't filed in years. Messy Brooks, no problem. They've seen it all and know exactly how to clean it up. With direct access to powerful IRS programs and expert negotiators on your side, Tax Network USA knows how to win. You'll get a free consultation, and if you qualify, they may even be able to reduce or eliminate what you owe. More importantly, they will help protect you from wage garnishments or bank levies. So don't wait for that next IRS letter. Call 800-958-1000 or visit tnusa.com to talk to a real expert at Tax Network USA. Take the pressure off. Let Tax Network USA handle your tax issues. Okay, we actually have new news on the Biden front. New news, kind of redundant, but on the Biden front, I continue to be annoyed that we have to talk about this story, but continue to believe that it's something we genuinely have to talk about because it is affecting our politics. Still, we talked about this with Alex Thompson a couple of shows ago. Alex Thompson reported out recently over at Axios that people's disenchantment over the just years of lying about the state of Joe Biden's health, Alex theorized, led right in to Andrew Cuomo's loss to Zohran Mamdani in the New York City mayoral primary, the Democratic primary, because people are so deeply disenchanted with the Democratic establishment that Andrew Cuomo represented. And again, we have a little bit more on that too. Before we do, though, I want to put this memo. This is actually from the same new book that we just referenced with Megyn and the Kamala Harris segment. We were talking about them pleading with Taylor Swift to go do a campaign appearance with. But from the same book, this is a debate memo. This is F11. And this is really funny because they, for some reason, capitalize. This is from, if you're watching this, you see the memo. It's almost written like a cartoonish version of a memo, but it says from senior advisors. Subject, follow-up on debates. It's from April of 2024, so just a couple of months before the debate disaster that we've now just passed the 1-year anniversary of, and they're capitalizing all of the yours. So in a memo attempting to persuade Joe Biden to do this debate, they are so clearly trying to communicate with a mentally diminished man that they have to capitalize every your and you to make it legible to him. And, you know, this is, I'm reading from Politico Playbook now. They say, basically, by holding the first debate in the spring, you, according to the memo, will be able to reach the widest audience possible. It's like Wheel of Fortune, right? Like that's how you have to write it for a mentally diminished elderly man. Before we are deep in the summer months with the conventions, Olympics, and family vacations taking precedence, in addition, the earlier you are able to debate, the better, so that the American people can see you standing next to Trump and showing the strength of your leadership compared to Trump's weakness and chaos. You get a free all-expenses trip paid to Hawaii, courtesy of Wheel of Fortune. That's literally how they're writing this here. But let me share, actually, this segment from Playbook that I thought was rather interesting. They added a little bit of commentary to the report, and this one particular bit just cracked me up. Here it is. It says, final thought bubble. There's been an awful lot written about a quote-unquote cover-up inside Biden's White House over the president's mental acuity. And as lots of excellent scoopy reporting has shown, Biden's closest aides were far from open about the extent of his decline. But it does also seem an odd kind of cover-up to recommend the president get out on national TV as soon as possible for a 90-minute debate with his opponent in front of millions of viewers. One to ponder as further details emerge. Does it seem like an odd kind of cover-up to try to get him to do the thing that every presidential candidate has done for the last several decades, since 1960, a televised presidential debate? Does it seem odd that they might be trying to move it up to the point where it can blend into the background of everyone's political memory by November? Does that seem like an odd kind of cover-up that they are trying to find the best possible freaking way to get this man to do a televised debate that doesn't make as bad of an impact on the election as they expect it to? I mean, it's just brain dead analysis to look at this and say totally undercuts. I mean, man, totally undercuts the narrative that this is some type of cover-up. What a weird cover-up. I mean, I know there's all of this. There's volumes of reporting at this point about people who were concerned in private and, you know, not expressing it publicly and keeping it to themselves. But hey, it can't really be a cover-up if you're trying to get that man on TV for 90 minutes. He's just the president of the United States. I mean, just like the reason nobody in the country, barely anybody in the media, has such a dumb reaction as this is. But it is a good example of how sometimes the reflexive Beltway press commentary, which is mostly from people who consider themselves reporters, can just be mind-numbingly stupid. This was a great moment in mind-numbing Beltway newsletter stupidity. But I will say, then Playbook went on to note something interesting. They said that Michigan pollster Jill Normington writes in a memo that playbook got their hands on, that both Mallory McMorrow, this is the Democratic Senate primary up in Michigan, and McMorrow's opponent, Stevens, are, quote, strong general election candidates, but that Stevens has a unique vulnerability in the general election. Her congressional voting record supporting Biden, which was, quote, the most damaging argument against any candidate in the poll. To be clear, this is about specifically narrowly her congressional voting record supporting Biden. It's not about the question of Biden's health. But I think if you're taking that poll and you're asked about support for Joe Biden or being sort of in lockstep with Joe Biden, it's all packaged into the same thing. Just to mention once again what Alex Thompson reported about how that may have affected the New York City Democrat mayoral primary. There are a couple of things that lurk beneath the surface of our politics in ways that people here in DC don't fully detect. I think for the Democratic base, particularly Democratic voters, what they were told over and over again about Joe Biden coming off, I mean, really bookending a decade of what the DNC did to Bernie Sanders, twice, by the way. And you could even add Marianne Williamson to that come 2020. You could probably add Tulsi Gabbard to that come 2020. This is, I mean, the people who don't even support Bernie Sanders and Marianne Williamson and Tulsi Gabbard look back on that, or Andrew Yang, and think, this is not Democratic. This is the Democratic Party. And so the Democratic primary base, I think, was genuinely pushed to the brink. And you were starting to see almost Tea Party-like moments. Actually, I didn't plan to mention this, but I am going to pull it up because I found it very amusing. I think the cool thing to do would be for me to share my own tweet. I feel like that is the humble that just, I think, really does show my sort of total humility in all circumstances. But this is Jennifer Welch of the I've Had It podcast freaking out at Hakeem Jeffries, unofficial mascot of After Party, actually, for not defending Mom Donnie on questions of anti-Semitism. And she said, this was your moment, Hakeem, this kind of cherry picking because of who donates to Hakeem Jeffries. AIPAC donates to Hakeem Jeffries. This is a pretty popular left-leaning podcast host with a Bravo background, by the way. But the reason that I shared my own tweet, despite, well, actually, it wasn't just because I wanted to sort of put my own pithiness on display. It was because it reminded me, and I'm being a little tongue-in-cheek here, though, of watching like Rick Santelli start the Tea Party live on television because he was so fed up with the way the country was being run. And you saw that with Republicans over the last decade. Elon Musk is starting his America Party. One thing that's interesting about that is Donald Trump has basically created a third party within the Republican Party. He sort of turned the Republican Party into his, like, in the image of Donald Trump, his third party. And the America Party, as Elon Musk has outlined its platform, being very concerned about debt and deficits, all of this, like, about spending, those things. It sounds like what Republicans were obsessed with before Trump. And I'm not saying any of those things are wrong, but as a priority, it's not like the huge kitchen table priority of most voters. You can disagree with that. It's the truth. You can see it show up in poll after poll. Maybe it will increasingly be a kitchen table issue for more and more voters. It's not right now. But all of that is to say, Trump forced the Republican Party to reckon with discontent in the base. People remember, right, when Rand Paul and Ted Cruz showed up here in town. They were called wacko birds, right, by John McCain. They were dissed by people like Lindsey Graham and Mitch McConnell. The Republican establishment detested them because they came here to D.C. and they mixed things up. And so you've seen a little bit of that sort of like with the squad, but they've mostly, if you talk to people on the left, my left-leaning friends, there's a lot of dissatisfaction with how they were very close to Nancy Pelosi, for example, over the course of her tenure. And that is sort of breaking up right now. And this is one of I just think actually the left in this case has their finger more on the pulse of the average electorate than the Democratic Party establishment, which doesn't have a pulse, period. So it wouldn't know how to recognize a pulse if a pulse stumbled into its vicinity. But it's true that the Democratic Party right now is being affected by one of those beneath the surface factors. I think for everyone, COVID is one of those. We don't talk about COVID anymore. Nobody wants to talk about COVID anymore. I know many people do actually continue to want to talk about COVID, but that's the perception of what the public thinks. But even if people aren't wanting to hear about COVID every single day in the news, it still influences institutional trust. It still influences civil society. It still influences the way we treat neighbors and teachers and schools and all of those things. So there are a couple of factors that I feel like have just been thrown out the window. Epstein is another one. Those are three really big ones that aren't always in the daily news cycle, but I think are really influential beneath the surface of our politics. Now, before we run, I wanted to I want to focus on a couple of things as it relates to abortion. Something else that's not often in the not often in the press these days, like post Dobbs. It just and whenever you're out of an election cycle, unless there's a major court case or a major policy decision, it tends to be relegated sort of to the background of politics. But Lily Allen had an interesting moment, a very sad moment on her podcast. I think this was last week. And I just want to roll this clip, and we're then going to transition to Cynthia Nixon in just a moment. But this is F5. Take a listen.
Abortions, I've had a few, but then again, I can't remember exactly how many.
What, really?
Yeah.
Why didn't this come up in last week's episode where we were just talking about abortions?
Because I was just letting you run with it.
Reveal everything.
I can't remember, yeah. I think maybe I want to say 4 or 5.
Yeah, I've had about 5 too. Lily, I'm so happy I can say that and you can say it and no one came to shoot us down.
I mean, why would anyone come to shoot you down? I don't know. The mere fact that they feel like they have to find solidarity in one another, I think speaks to the obvious trauma that comes along with abortion, and the industry has obviously tried to create as little friction as is possible. Abortions are actually up post-Dobbs, largely due to mifepristone and abortion pill prescriptions that have been spread around the country that are really sold as a kind of a frictionless experience, one of the sort of most painless ways to go about a very painful process. I'm speaking emotionally, but in this case, it also does turn out to often be physically very painful. And I know a lot of people disagree with this on the right. I'm more anti-abortion than most people on the right, and I want to get into a little bit before we run of where I come from on this issue. Let's put up here. I have it in front of me, and I'm going to put this on the screen because shortly after that Lily Allen little song, Cynthia Nixon, obviously a sort of very prominent left-wing activist, so it's not surprising, but Cynthia Nixon Instagrammed this picture on a very pristine-looking boat, maybe yacht, I don't know for sure. That would be called Below Deck Hell. No, I'm kidding. But in a hat that says, it's a Trump-coded hat that says, "Make abortion great again." So it looks like a MAGA hat, and then if you read the text closer, it says, "Make abortion great again." Well, why do I bring up the boat? Well, I bring up the boat because after Roe, or I think this was shortly before Roe, I went back and I crunched some of the numbers. So the New York Times wrote in 2019 that women getting abortions today are far more likely to be poor than those who had the procedure done 20 years ago, and says about half of women who had an abortion in 2014 were below the poverty line, with another quarter very close to poverty. But if you compare that number to Gallup data, there's I think, really important takeaway about class that comes out. Gallup data from 2021 found that respondents asked whether abortion was morally wrong, morally acceptable, or dependent on the situation, were more supportive as yearly household income increased. I put some of these charts together in an article at the Federalist back at the time. Above the $100,000 income threshold, 63% of people said abortion was morally acceptable and 32% said morally wrong. Below the $40,000 threshold, those numbers were almost reversed. Only 38% of respondents said it was morally acceptable, while 55% said it was morally wrong. This pattern was consistent among Gallup's research on the question in recent years. And on Roe in particular, there was a 2020 survey, again, from the New York Times that showed a similar pattern on education levels. So while respondents of every education level supported Roe in much higher numbers than they opposed it at the time, support, you will not be surprised to hear, decreased alongside educational attainment, while opposition increased. And so I say this all because there is a tendency among affluent liberal women to claim the mantle of protecting vulnerable, disadvantaged women. If you look at those numbers, in all likelihood, a lot of those vulnerable, disadvantaged women that the sort of liberal activists like a Cynthia Nixon or a Lily Allen, liberal celebrity activists, purport to be championing, likely many of them feel forced into the situation. Maybe forced by a man, maybe forced by financial circumstances. But it makes it, when you think about that, probably an even more painful experience for women who don't believe, as the polling shows, that it's morally acceptable. That was the term Gallup polled. Or so they polled morally wrong, morally acceptable, or dependent on the situation. And it's just a really twisted thing to do, to say make abortion great again, to put that on a hat as a wealthy multi-millionaire celebrity, currently with 2 major shows on HBO, right? Gilded Age, which by the way I love, lots of thoughts, and the Sex and the City reboot is, what's it called? And Just Like That, something that's also on HBO right now. To be posing with that hat, make abortion great again. I would love to sit down in front of Cynthia Nixon and ask her what she means by great. Does she mean empowering? Does she mean financially liberating? Because I bet a lot of the vulnerable, underprivileged women that she purports to champion would reflect on their experiences with abortion, not by singing it, as Lily Allen did, but by mourning it, and with deep, deep sorrow. And there's a psychological analysis that you can go into here with Lily Allen, and obviously I am no therapist. God forbid someone ever sit down across from me as their therapist. But there's a pretty obvious armchair analysis that there's some coping happening and some attempt to persuade and convince yourself. You actually kind of saw it happening in real time in that Lily Allen podcast segment, to try and feel light and to try to bring levity to the situation. And if I go back to the Cynthia Nixon Instagram, and I'm going to put this on the screen, there's a couple comments here that I find interesting. One person says, I'm pro-choice, and I think that hat is absolutely repulsive and disgraceful. I am pro-choice, another person says, but celebrating abortion as great is something only a vapid ghoul would say. So another person adds, pro-life or pro-choice, there isn't anything great about abortions. Sick. This is actually Naomi Wolf wrote an essay in, this was like the New Republic in the late 90s. Kind of thinking about how if you are an honest pro-abortion feminist, and she was at the time, I actually haven't kept up with where Naomi Wolf is on abortion now, because she's had sort of an evolution, but Naomi Wolf said at the time, you have to basically embrace those graphic images that anti-abortion protesters kind of walk around with all of the time outside of abortion clinics and all of that, because you have to embrace the reality that, if you're being honest with women, if you're being honest with yourself, that that is the stage of fetal development, baby development, that is being terminated at particular stages of the pregnancy. And Christopher Hitchens was, people are often surprised to learn, very heterodox for the crowd that he mingled with, and was spoiling a lot of people's abortion parades back when he was alive, and saying basically you had the onus is on you to tell us when life begins in a way that actually makes sense. Otherwise, there's no other way to see abortion than taking away a life. Now, I didn't mean to delve into a long sort of fundamental debate about the morality of abortion. I just really wanted to talk about how it should be so obscene. It should be seen as obscene and deeply hypocritical for people who claim to champion women in disadvantaged situations to be making light of abortion, to be talking about abortion as something that is quote unquote great, worthy of a cute little song. It's just incredibly, like, in the same way that I will be honest that I have a position that is not in the mainstream of the American public's position on this issue. Actually, of all people, Donald Trump's position on this issue, even if you don't like his policies or the judges he appointed to the Supreme Court, all fair points of contention if you're pro-abortion. But I think his point to push the Republican Party on this is probably more in touch with the average American than I am. I certainly will concede to that, but this isn't it either. But Lily Allen will get friendly write-ups from the entertainment press for doing this. Cynthia Nixon will continue to be treated like a hero for the vulnerable among us, despite posing on a boat in a Make Abortion Great Again hat. Just really distasteful, and out of touch behavior. No real surprise. I'm not shocking anybody with that analysis, but I thought it was worth touching on this evening. And by the way, that reminds me, I have a correction to our last episode, because we talked about Charlize Theron. And as I was prepping for the show, Charlize Theron was on, I think it was Call Her Daddy. We have so many callbacks in today's episode, but I think she was on Call Her Daddy and was talking about, we ran the clip. She was on Call Her Daddy and was talking about how she had just had sex with a 26-year-old, something like that. She's 49 years old, and that she feels like she's now having all of the sex that she should have had in her 20s and 30s. So we talked about that. And one point that I raised is Charlize Theron has 2 daughters, and she is publicly talking about having sex with 26-year-olds. It's all so disgusting. And getting, again, friendly headlines from the entertainment press for it. Well, it turns out, I prepped for this by reading about Charlize Theron as a mother. Whatever articles came across my radar, this is how Orwellian of a situation we find ourselves in. I believe one of Charlize Theron's daughters is, I think, born male, based on media reports, and told Charlize Theron at the age of 3, according to the actress, that they felt they were the wrong sex, that their sex assigned at birth, as we would hear, wasn't comporting at the time. And that was absolutely not intentional on my part. I actually looked into this. I read, and multiple publications that I read, nothing was amiss. It just referred to Charlize Theron's 2 daughters. There was no note in there. And Charlize Theron has said, actually, that one of the reasons she went public with this story is that the wrong pronouns were being used in media reports. So just a little anecdote there. Cynthia Nixon also has a trans child. So, without going down that rabbit hole, the celebrity women they're not all right. But you didn't need me to tell you that. You really didn't need me to tell you that. That's about it for today's show. I mean, I could keep rambling for another And I keep going for like another couple of hours, at least. But nobody wants that. Nobody needs that. So I'm not going to force it on anyone. But I did just want to obviously send lots and lots of love and prayers to Texas. My goodness. Thinking about them as I know everyone is. So wanted to shout out, obviously, the first responders and send them some prayers. And also mention, by the way, I've been emailing with some of you. You can email me at emily@devilmaycaremedia.com. That is always available. I try to read and respond to almost every email. I think I respond to almost every one of them. So you can hit me up there. It always helps a lot when you leave reviews and you subscribe. It was an absolute pleasure to have Megyn here. I'm so glad I got to tell her that little anecdote about the summer of 2009, if I'm remembering correctly, because that one has always stuck out to me. I've always meant to share that one with her, but truly, she is just someone I've admired literally since Barack Obama was in office. And I don't want to say it because it may be hurtful to some people, but I was in high school. But here we are now. It's the after party. Mondays, Wednesdays, 10 p.m. Don't miss an episode. It would be ridiculous to miss an episode. We have some awesome guests coming up, but that'll do it for us tonight. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you back here with more after party on Wednesday at 10 p.m.